Welcome to The Debate, where we examine different viewpoints with context, not conflict. Today, we're turning our focus to Levi Strauss & Co., a brand that is, arguably one of the most culturally formative consumer companies in history.
Absolutely. Founded way back in 1853, Levi's literally invented the blue jean. But the challenge for a brand like this, a generational brand, is really the tension between that massive cultural legacy and the intense, often unforgiving demands of the modern market. We're talking specifically about genuine sustainability and, consistent product quality.
Precisely. And that tension gives us our central question today. Is Levi's fundamentally an enduring, adaptive cultural icon whose legacy powers its modern relevance? Or is it actually a legacy brand whose historical baggage and operational challenges signal a real struggle to adapt to a sustainability-focused, high-integrity market?
And I'll be arguing that Levi's iconic image is, well, it's increasingly being overshadowed. I think the inconsistencies in product quality and the unresolved historical and ethical debts demand a reckoning that goes, a lot deeper than their current initiatives.
And I'm going to argue that far from struggling, Levi's iconic status provides the exact platform it needs to execute proactive, advanced sustainability strategies, ensuring its enduring global relevance. Now, if you're finding this analysis compelling, please take just a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to WhyItTV on YouTube. And let us know in the comments which perspective you find more convincing, or maybe why neither one fully satisfies you. You can follow us on X and TikTok at WhyItV. And remember, this debate is part of a full WhyItV Levi's series, which includes the explainer, critique, deep dive, and infographic. My position is, I think, pretty clear. Levi's success is rooted in its unparalleled ability to remain at the, quote, center of culture. We're talking about 150 years of continuous relevance here. The 501 gene is the centerpiece of this success, right? It's this constant straight-leg button-fly staple that has somehow survived every single shift in fashion since the 1960s. The brand's power, it just transcends clothing. It's a profound cultural vessel. We saw this during the civil rights movement, where activists, including figures like Martin Luther King Jr., wore denim to signal solidarity with the working class. And later, these jeans became potent symbols of liberation and Western identity for people living behind the Iron Curtain.
That is a powerful history, I'll give you that. But a historical narrative can't just whitewash historical facts. The claim of being a symbol of equality is, I think, critically undermined by some pretty tangible evidence of past ethical compromise. You just have to look at the company's original products. Early jeans from the 1880s explicitly carried labels stating they were the only kind made by white labor. Now, this was a direct market-driven reflection of the really virulent anti-Chinese racism following the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. The company prioritized market politics over universal ethics. This isn't just some regrettable footnote. It's a foundational ethical debt that needs proper engagement, not just dismissal because the product got popular later on.
But that subsequent cultural acceptance is the central point?
Well, and further complicating the picture is the operational side today. The perception of the core product quality is deteriorating, and I'd say significantly. If you visit any consumer forum online, you'll find endless complaints about failed zippers, inconsistent sizing, and crucially, the use of perceptibly lower quality cotton. We're talking shorter fibers, thinner fabric in their mass market lines. For a brand that was built on durability, this is just corrosive. So despite the robust performance in fiscal year 2024, where, net revenues were up over 3% and they became the top U.S. women's denim brand, that growth is arguably built on leveraging a legacy that their lower-tier products are actively failing to uphold.
I would push back on that interpretation of their recent performance, and pretty strongly. This is not a company that's just coasting on nostalgia. It is actively transforming. We see this in the shift toward a DTC-first strategy, direct-to-consumer, which, gives them better control over their branding and margins. And crucially, we see it in their commitment to profits through principles. Levi's has aggressively pursued industry leadership and sustainability, most notably through the Waterless program, which has saved over 1 billion liters of water. They're actively working towards net zero emissions by 2050, aligning themselves with the most stringent global climate goals. I mean, that is the definition of an adaptive leader, not a struggling legacy brand.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the environmental efforts match the systemic scale of the crisis they're facing. While saving water in the finishing stage, what we call Tier 1 factory processes, is positive, sure, it addresses the smallest part of the problem. Raw material sourcing, predominantly cotton, accounts for a massive 75% of total water withdrawals in their supply chain. Nearly 90% of their material inputs are cotton, and much of that is sourced from highly vulnerable, water-stressed regions like the Sutlej, Indus, and Meghna river basins in South Asia. So the magnitude of the environmental challenge at the farm level, what we'd call Tier 4, it just completely dwarfs the current factory-focused initiatives.
And I also think your focus on financial headwinds is a little disproportionate.
I come at it from a different way. The financial stress is impossible to ignore. The source material notes $188.7 million in restructuring charges recorded in 2024 as part of Project Fuel, which is this internal cost-cutting program. They also took over $116 million in goodwill and intangible asset impairment charges, partly related to the Beyond Yoga brand. So when a company is forced to absorb nearly $300 million in 1 year just to restructure and write down failed acquisitions, the profitability required to fund these massive systemic environmental investments into Tier 4 regions becomes highly questionable. This vulnerability puts that whole adaptive leader claim into serious doubt for me. Let's delve into that foundational issue of ethical consistency. I mean, how can Levi's credibly maintain its status as a symbol of American culture and equality, a position cemented by its adoption by activists, when the company explicitly leveraged racist exclusion policies to gain market advantage in the 1880s? That move showed a priority of expediency over principle.
Okay, while the history of the white labor label is yes, it's a stain on their early record, I would push back strongly on the idea that the brand's enduring meaning is defined by a decade of poor marketing policy in the 19th century. The cultural life of the product itself definitively evolved. By the 1890s, the policy was reversed. More importantly, the garment became a neutral canvas. It became associated with counterculture, with solidarity, with progress from the civil rights movement, as we mentioned, to the introduction of Lady Levi's in 1934, which was genuinely radical for the time in normalizing pants for women. The cultural debt they repaid, I think, was paid through the product's subsequent adoption by those fighting for equality.
I'd concede that the product's cultural meaning evolved, sure, but the question is about corporate integrity and its ongoing commitment to ethics today. So if we accept that past compromises existed, we have to scrutinize present commitments. While they boast robust supplier codes of conduct which prohibit forced labor and discrimination, these are internal, non-binding documents. We've seen scrutiny regarding potential forced labor issues in their supply chain. So why does a company with such a strong ethical narrative rely solely on internal codes when more binding multilateral agreements like the Bangladesh Accord or similar legal mechanisms offer much greater transparency and accountability for worker safety?
Well, that line of reasoning seems to imply that an internal, comprehensive supplier code of conduct backed by a pretty significant worker well-being initiative launched back in 2011 is somehow inherently insufficient. For a company that operates in dozens of countries with highly varied legal frameworks, a centralized, enforceable code can often be more effective and adaptable than trying to shoehorn a single geographically limited agreement like the Accord into a global context. They're tackling forced labor risk directly by focusing resources on deep supply chain mapping and specific audit programs tailored to high-risk regions rather than, relying on a one-size-fits-all legal structure.
But the material indicates that deep supply chain mapping still faces challenges when the relationship isn't based on binding contractual safety guarantees. This just highlights that ethical debt isn't just historical. It's an ongoing complexity that requires structural solutions beyond just self-regulation.
And this ongoing ethical complexity has a direct parallel in the present product strategy. Let's talk about quality. You highlighted segmentation and inconsistency. I would argue that this is simply the reality of managing a global, multi-channel brand that spans from premium denim enthusiasts to the mass market consumer who's just looking for affordable quality. The iconic core products, the 501s, the 505s, they maintain their signature specifications. The red tab, the arcuate stitching, the specific straight fit.
I have to disagree. That separation of quality, the technical distinction between the higher-end lines marked by a capital E on the red tab versus the mass-market lower-cost lines with a lowercase e, that's perceived by dedicated consumers as a betrayal of the core brand promise. The 501 was always the durable work pant. It didn't matter where you bought it. So when consumers report failures in zippers or notice the fabric is thinner, which is due to the use of shorter cotton fibers to optimize cost, it damages the very foundation of the legacy. This isn't adaptation. It's profit optimization at the expense of product integrity.
But that optimization is what allows Levi's to democratize denim quality globally and maintain the financial health needed to fund its massive environmental goals. Furthermore, the commitment to durability isn't gone. They still offer premium lines like Made and Crafted that use raw and selvage denim for the connoisseur, and they actively uphold their lifetime warranty for core products, often replacing damaged 501s. They're managing market needs, not eroding quality universally.
I'm just not convinced. When the price of their mass-market product is already nearing that of genuine raw denim alternatives offered by smaller producers, which critics universally hail as a superior, more durable product, it exposes Levi's for relying on the memory of durability rather than actually providing it. It suggests they're charging a legacy premium for a depreciated product. They really risk becoming the poster child for the difference between branding and reality.
That friction is real, but let's look at where that optimization is allowing them to make critical, industry-leading investments. Sustainability. You correctly identified that 75% of their water impact comes from raw materials. Tier 4 cotton cultivation in high-risk, water-scarce regions. How can Levi's possibly address 75% of its environmental footprint when it's so far up the supply chain?
I believe the focus on factory efficiencies is a distraction. They're addressing the middle of the problem, while the core threat, the reliance on cotton from the drought-prone Sutlej, Indus, and Medna River basins, remains structurally embedded in the business model. The scale of the environmental risk is overwhelming their Tier 1 initiatives.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the full context of their systemic approach? We have to acknowledge the monumental challenge of addressing Scope 3 emissions. For an apparel company, Scope 3 accounts for over 99% of total emissions. And why is this so hard? Because Scope 3 includes the vast majority of activities outside of their direct control, things like raw material production, textile manufacturing by third parties, and even consumer care, like how often you wash your jeans. This necessitates systemic, high-level action.
Systemic action has to be measurable, not just aspirational.
And it is measurable. They are tackling Tier 4 directly through their updated 2030 water strategy. They're not just vaguely talking about water, they are specifically prioritizing action across identified high-risk subbasins in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. This strategy mandates moving beyond factory efficiency by engaging in watershed restoration and investing in water sanitation and hygiene, or WASH, projects by 2030. Furthermore, they are leveraging powerful financial incentives, like the Sustainable Supply Chain Finance Program with HSBC, to reward suppliers in these high-risk regions for meeting strict environmental performance requirements. This connects their financial leverage directly to Tier 4 environmental results. This is high-level corporate governance and collective action, not tokenism.
But the reality is that the financial structure of the company is under immense stress. That $188.7 million restructuring charge, Project Fuel, suggests an internal battle to maintain profitability. So when faced with the choice between spending millions more to transform a high-risk Tier 4 supply chain and satisfying shareholder demands by cutting costs internally, where does a publicly traded company prioritize its limited capital? The impairment charges on Beyond Yoga suggest that Levi's struggles to generate successful growth outside of its core denim legacy, forcing greater reliance on that core brand, which is, at the same time, under quality pressure. The vulnerability is structural.
I would argue that Project Fuel, the restructuring, is precisely designed to create the necessary efficiency and margin required to fund those long-term systemic investments in climate and water. It is a necessary financial adjustment to secure the future, allowing the company to commit to those Scope 3 partnerships with groups like the Organic Cotton Accelerator and Fashion for Good, which are essential to meet the Paris Agreement goals. You simply cannot fund the future if your present operations are inefficient. Ultimately, Levi's has proven its resilience not just through nostalgia, but through proactive adaptation. The brand's deep cultural relevance allows it the breathing room to execute complex new strategies. Whether it's the move to direct-to-consumer, which now accounts for 46% of total revenue for better control and profitability, or its leadership in advanced water stewardship and climate transition planning aiming for net zero by 2050, Levi's is driving forward. The critique of quality inconsistency has to be measured against the company's comprehensive commitment to innovation and its established, secure position as an international style icon navigating an incredibly complex global supply chain.
And while Levi's offers compelling, ambitious plans, especially in sustainability, the evidence suggests a pervasive struggle to reconcile legacy with modern reality. The brand has to contend with the high cost of maintaining that legacy, quality erosion in core products that damages consumer trust, and the unresolved issues concerning historical ethical debt and reliance on non-binding supply chain agreements. The significant internal financial pressures, the restructuring and impairment charges, they suggest that maintaining profitability may compete directly with the profound multi-million-dollar investments needed to truly solve the massive systemic environmental and social challenges inherent in their global sourcing. The question for me remains whether the Levi's of today is relying on the fading memory of the Buy It for Life 501 rather than consistent modern execution and product integrity across all of its segments.
Our disagreement ultimately reveals the complexity inherent in assessing a generational brand. Its success demands navigating not only its deeply rooted, and yes, occasionally compromised past, but also the increasingly urgent and expensive demands of the modern, conscientious consumer and the climate crisis. There is clearly much more to explore in the material regarding this critical tension. We hope this exchange has illuminated the different perspectives on Levi's and the future of legacy brands. This is just one view within our full coverage of the topic. Be sure to engage with our explainer, critique, deep dive, and infographic for complementary perspectives. The full topic drops first on YouTube every Friday at 11:59 p.m., with TikTok clips released daily the following week. We encourage you to comment thoughtfully, engage with the other assets on WhyItTV, and return next Friday for a new topic.